What can you tell us about osteoclasts and osteoblasts and bone?
Okay, so our question was, how are osteoclasts and osteoblasts involved in the development of bone and risk for osteoporosis? So we basically explained how, since the bones are made of osteoclast and osteoblast, what's happening in osteoporosis is that it's that the body or the bones are losing kind of the essentials it needs. So osteoclast, which breaks down the bone, is higher than osteoblast. I don't know how to explain this too well. So there's more osteoclast than osteoblasts in the bone. So it's basically breaking down the bones, causing osteoporosis.
So what we're looking at is a balance between osteoblastic and osteoclastic activity. And during the early periods in your life, there's an excess, you have bone building cells predominating. But as we said in the group, you still need osteoclastic activity because as bones grow, when the osteoblasts are increasing the bone size, you need the osteoclasts to help remove the bone that's no longer needed. Or if you break a bone, you need the osteoblasts to help replace bone, but you need the osteoclasts to help remove the bone that's no longer needed. Okay, and then there's a period of time where there's balance, and then there's a period of time when osteoclastic activity exceeds, if you will, osteoblastic activity, and that can increase risk for developing osteoporosis. Yeah, so just like she said. All right, group 2.
Hi, so our question was, do blood calcium levels give an accurate assessment of bone health? And we said no, they do not give an accurate assessment of bone health because blood calcium levels will remain the same despite adequate or inadequate calcium intake. So bone calcium will be given up in order to keep blood calcium levels normal, but in doing so, the bones can become weak and osteoporotic. And blood calcium, just some functions of blood calcium, is that it's involved in reactions such as muscle contraction, heartbeat, nerve transmission, and blood clotting.
Right. So even though it's only 1% in your blood, that 1% is involved in keeping your heart beating, in keeping your blood clotting, in keeping muscles contracting. It's just, even though it's just that 1%, and yet you will sacrifice from that 99% just to maintain that 1%. That's how important that is. Even after all these years, I'm still in awe of that. Okay, group 3.
Our question was, what is the difference between type 1 and type 2 osteoporosis? And include an explanation of the type of bone involved in each. So type 1 osteoporosis is associated with a loss of estrogen, which is a hormone, and androgen, resulting in increased bone turnover, where bone resorption exceeds bone formation. And so that creates predominant loss in the trabecular bone, which is compared to the cortical bone, and the trabecular bone is the porous bone tissue located on the inside of the bone. So on the contrary, type 2 osteoporosis is a result of long-term calcium deficiency. It's gradual and usually age-related, with the predominant loss being in the cortical bone, which is the outer, harder part of the bone.
Okay, so also calcium deficiency can result in type 1 osteoporosis, but we'll let group 4 explain how. Go.
Yeah. So our question was, describe the bone and bank analogy and why it is important to make deposits into this account early in life. So we said that during the first 25 years, the human stores calcium in the bones, specifically in the trabecular, and then begins to withdraw from there for the rest of your life. So noticeably around when you're 50, especially for women, you go through menopause and it stops storing it. So the more you deposit and save during this time, the more calcium you have to draw on later on. So you don't sacrifice the height and the bone density. So basically, the analogy is saying to draw on interest, not on principle, to reduce the risk of osteoporosis.
Yes. So this analogy, and maybe I said it in the video, for years I was looking for some kind of analogy to help explain the bone, what's going on in the bone. And it was one of my nutrition students from Babson that came up with Hansen, that was his name, Hansen, came up with this analogy. Thank you, Hansen. All right, group 5. Talk to us about food sources of bioavailable iron for the vegan. 5. Are you there?
Okay, so I can kind of speak on this a little bit. So we discussed that there are multiple types, first of iron. So this includes heme iron, which is present mainly in meat, poultry, and fish, and is well absorbed. And this is referred to as ferrous iron. Then with that, there is non-heme iron, which is account for the majority of iron in plants, and it's less well absorbed. This is known as ferric iron. So to find a bioavailable iron for a vegan, there are a bunch of different sources that include those. So those include like lentils, beans, tofu, fortified breakfast cereals with iron, and dried fruits such as prunes, figs, and apricots. And to increase iron absorption, many of these foods are best eaten along with foods that are high in vitamin C or ascorbic acid, because it helps digest and absorb the iron in the foods.
Okay, so let me just kind of complete that a little. So what vitamin C does is it helps change the ferric or non-absorbable form of iron into ferrous, which is more bioavailable. Okay, so ferrous iron, and that's the different electrical charge, which you don't need to know. What I do want you to know is the difference between ferric and ferrous, that ferrous is found in heme iron, and ferric is found in non-heme or vegetable sources, non-animal sources of iron. And that's what vegetarians or vegans usually consume, which is one of the reasons why vegans are at higher risk for iron deficiency anemia. What vitamin C can do is change that electrical charge of the iron from the less bioavailable to the more bioavailable, so that it is able to then increase the absorption of iron from the foods that are from vegetable sources. Okay, so that's what that's about. Any questions about the material that we covered today? Because it was a lot. All right, we talked about iron deficiency. We looked at iron, the different sources of iron, ferrous, ferric. We looked a lot at calcium and bone health, and bone health is really important. I want you to understand the different stages in life where your body is taking up calcium and how important it is to, I'm not telling you to go out and drink 5 glasses of milk, but maybe the foods that are that interfere with calcium absorption, now's the time where you can improve your bone density. This period, and it's when you're least paying attention to it, but this is the time in life when, in your lives, where you are able to increase your bone density. And things like poor diet, consuming sodas, increasing the form or those foods while decreasing calcium sources. But it's not just calcium, it's vitamin D, it's vitamin K. There are other nutrients, other vitamins and minerals involved in bone health. But now is the time when you can increase your bone density or deposit into your calcium bank, so that when you reach the stage in your life where your body starts to normally, and it's normal after a certain stage, to start losing bone mass. All right, but the idea with the bone bank analogy is that if we're talking about a savings account, that you are drawing on the interest and not the principal, thus preserving your bone mass. Now, there are other things that you can do to increase bone density besides diet, and one of those is weight-bearing exercise. Weight-bearing exercise stresses the bone. The muscle is pulling on the bone, and that appears to have some effect on osteoblastic activity. So after, and this has been shown in studies in nursing homes, that getting folks who are basically immobile, and that's something that decreases bone density, I'll say in a sec, but to get them to even lift 1-pound cans of vegetables or just something, water bottles, that for them is stressing their bone, and that may increase bone density. Okay, so, and this is another thing that can happen if you have a long-term illness or if you're bedridden for a while, is that not only does your bone mass or muscle mass decrease, but you can lose bone density. Once upon a time when astronauts used to go into space and then they would land in the water and they would have to carry people out because they had lost bone mass and bone density and they couldn't walk. Now they have the space station, and I don't know what else they do. That's my husband's domain because he's an astronomer, so he's more in touch with that. I just like to throw in there that my husband's an astronomer every now and then. But so it's not just diet that affects bone density, but it's also activity. Okay, so I just want to make sure you're not, that what you're doing now, again, we're planting the seed for behaviors that in the long term can help reduce your risk of developing osteoporosis. Any questions? All right, so your diet projects are due, and I will be online. What did I say? From 10 to 11, I guess, on Monday. But if you have any questions before then, by all means, get in touch with me. And then on Wednesday, we'll figure out how you're going to present and submit your papers. Okay? Any questions? All right, thank you. Bye now.